Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of I Am I. My name is Josh Ansley, and this week we're moving along in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali to the next two kleshas. We're going to group them together this week. A lot of times they're talked about together. It's raga and dvesha, right? And it is attraction and aversion is one way it's usually translated. Likes and dislikes. Another interesting one is desires and hatreds. And I think that's an interesting one to think about because it's sort of taking it to the extreme, right? Is understanding that we all have some sort of hatred in us, these dark sides that we don't want to look at. So that's like a really fun, fun. I guess I'm just fucked up with my ideas. Fun is, but this fun way to really look at the deep, dark sides of yourself, to really accept that you have some sort of hatred in there somewhere, even if it's hatred of hatred, right? And not to be, mystical about it or too convoluted about it, but recognize that somewhere deep inside you there might be some sort of hatred, right? Or maybe we just take it simply back to attraction and aversion, right? And I think it's important to recognize that, like I said, all these kleshas, that everybody has them. This is the functioning of a human being. This is the mechanism, the human mechanism, and how it works, right? So if you recognize that you just bring these principles into your life in some way and just see how they might operate in your life, see what might manifest from them, as opposed to having it as be some sort of way of being, just recognize that, see what happens when you bring these principles into your life and your way of understanding. So if you recognize suddenly that the mind works in going towards its likes and avoiding its dislikes, that is the nature of the human mind, you start to recognize how you might be ruled by your likes and dislikes, right? And those likes and dislikes are things that are developed as a sense of your personality, your ego, right? Because as I said, it goes down from ignorance. Ignorance creates that. Because of ignorance of our divine core, we have the ego, the separation of self, the separate self, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because there's beautiful things that are parts of the ego, right? Beautiful talents and skills, right? And then as a result of that ego, there's the likes and dislikes. So I like this and I don't like that. Now I'll say also, not from a black and white perspective, talking about this duality, but from a space that it's not bad to have likes and dislikes. Like I said, everybody has them. Maybe there's a reason why we have them. The idea is not to be ruled by them, right? So if we can, and this is just my perspective on it, it's also coming from a little bit of a tantric perspective, as we can get deeper into that. But to understand that if you don't know what your likes and dislikes are, then there might need to be some work done. And I would venture to say that if you don't know what your likes and dislikes are, it might be because you're actually avoiding the discomfort that it'll take to actually know what those likes and dislikes are, to actually do the work to get to know yourself on a deeper level, to know what your likes and dislikes are. So it's actually just being a slave of your likes and dislikes, or a slave of ignorance to the fact that you don't even recognize that there are likes and dislikes that you have. I'm just an easygoing person, and maybe there is actually attractions and aversions on deeper levels, that maybe you're such an easygoing person because you're afraid to rock the boat, and you're afraid to draw healthy boundaries, and you're afraid to live in this world of duality, so you try to just keep it simple and easy, right? So there's a lot of layers to this stuff. That's why I'm not talking about some black and white thing that you bring in and this is how it has to be. They start to manifest in your life, and you just have to discuss them and contemplate on them. That's what this whole work is about, is knowing yourself on deeper layers. Now, there's some suggestions that are offered through this philosophy and through the work that could say, well, hey, maybe at your core, you're absolutely divine and you don't need anything, right? So this is a suggestion now that to get into our likes and dislikes, that regardless of our likes and dislikes, of our attractions and aversion, raga and dvesha, that there is a space beyond all of that, of which we are ignorant, that can actually hold space for all of that. So it's not necessarily bad to have likes and dislikes. It's only when you're ruled by them. They say, I don't know who they is. I don't know who the fuck they are. But there was a Swami that I was listening to teaching one time, and he was talking about that an enlightened person still has preferences. An enlightened person will go in and order coffee, have a preference for coffee, but when there's no coffee, they'll just take tea. Right? So it's how you respond when your preference is not met. Same thing with expectations. If you have an expectation, it's normal to have expectation. If you take a step and you're expecting the earth to be there, if it's not, you're probably going to be rocked a little bit. But how do you respond when that happens? right? So are you responding from a space outside of your own attractions and aversions, or are you a slave to them? Because as you get deeper into the work and understanding, a lot of these attraction aversions that you have, which you think are actually you, and it's like, well, that's what I like or don't like, they're actually just programming. It might be what the society has actually conditioned you to believe that you want or need. And it's not actually something that you really want or need until you've done that work on a deeper level to be like, why the fuck do I want to get married or have kids? Or why the fuck do I not want to get married or have kids? Again, it's not about right or wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't get married or should get married. That's not my point. Is to know yourself on deeper levels and where you thrive. Because ultimately, if we're working into a space of your deeper desires that might be outside of your mind, outside of your just likes and dislikes as a result of this personality, it could possibly, maybe there's a space of deeper desire. For instance, if you have some sort of calling, right? If you have a calling, and your deeper calling might be something that is requiring a tremendous amount of work, a bunch of work that you don't want to do. So you're now ignoring your calling because of your more surface likes and dislikes. I don't want to run the business of that, even though that you have this calling to run your own business and maybe a beautiful business of being of service to people. But you're not doing it because you're stepping away from the discomfort of what it's going to take to actually do that. I'm talking to myself, right? But it's growing little by little, right? And I'm growing and changing by incorporating this understanding into my life. So if you're ignoring this deeper calling, but that's why it's just important to look at it, because ultimately you might find that actually that deeper calling is actually just because you want to do something that you want to do. Are you taking your artistry and your gift and using it to be of service to other people, or is it just to get money for yourself? And to get success for yourself. And again, that's not even necessarily a bad thing. But when it happens to rule you, and you start to ruin your life or other people's lives, or compromise love or self-expression in your life, just because you think you're supposed to be doing this and you're stuck into this little space of, well, this is what I want to do. Right? If you're ruled by your desires, that's where you're fucked. Because the freedom comes from a place that is outside of our likes and dislikes, outside of that world of duality. When I say outside of it, right, it's actually a space that, like I said, holds space for it all. So that you can look at all of it. So that you can see which ones are going to be beneficial or not. Because maybe that deeper desire that is outside of your likes and dislikes, maybe it is a spiritual calling in some way, whatever that means to you, right? Maybe that desire is actually the same desire of your lower, let's say lower, or your, more surface self. And that's okay. So maybe they coincide. And you wouldn't even know that there were two levels of that desire until there's some disparity in some way, right? Until something happens and you can no longer do that. And you're like, well, yeah, I can live without that. And you're like, okay, maybe it was just the surface desire of what you wanted to do. Or like myself, where I've completely stepped away from my spirituality, not my spirituality, but in some ways, I guess so. Completely stepped away from my calling because I was like, no, this isn't actually it. And then it started to come back in a more natural way that is absolutely some sort of deeper thing. What it is, I don't fucking know. It could be my vasanas, which are like the ultimate, I don't get too much into that, but it is actually a deeper desire, right? That is still a result of ignorance of my divine core, because if I had that divine core awareness, then I wouldn't necessarily have a desire. But that's pulling me into this deeper space, right? So it's surrendering to something higher. And for me right now, it's like surrendering into this higher calling that I feel that I do have with my artistry, right? And that it's absolutely just happening as I surrender. It's not something I have to fight for and make happen, because that was the same thing, but coming from an ego perspective of what I want, and I still wanted the fame and success in it, and I still do. So I have to watch out for that, because that might come to fucking bite me once in a while. So it's actually just, my whole point is like, I'm kind of rambling, but as I usually do, but it's understanding, bringing these principles into your life. When you just take it into the fact and see that there are these likes and dislikes in your life. And when you start to just bring that into your consciousness and awareness, as you start to navigate in this world, you'll start to suddenly see, where am I ruled by these likes and dislikes? And then you go deeper and understand, what are those likes and dislikes? There's a great book called The Pleasure Trap, right? And it talks about why we have this, why all the great food that tastes so great is so bad for us, right? And all the stuff that we don't like is like healthy for us, for most of us, let's say, right? And it talks about very simply that when from hunter-gatherer times before the advent of agriculture, right, and settling down, hunter-gatherer times, we didn't know where the next meal was coming from. So there's some sort of programming, whether it be from then or beforehand, even before that, in some sort of our evolutionary process, right? in this evolutionary process, which is a fucking miracle in itself. Science is a miracle, right? They're not working against each other. They're working with each other. It's together. It's the same thing. So in our evolutionary process, this understanding that, oh, this high caloric food content is something that I need because I don't know where the next meal's coming from. So when bread started coming about and it was very dense amount of caloric content in a small space, right? Very dense. It would be something that our mind would go, that tastes really great. I want that. I need that, because it's really just a primal brain thing that is saying survival mechanism. So now we live in a world where, you know, the ice creams at the supermarket, we put all this fucking sugar and this high caloric content into this tiny little space, and you're like, oh my God, this tastes so amazing. And you're being ruled by a deeper sense of yourself, not because, and you think, I want the ice cream. You don't want the fucking ice cream. Your fucking survival mechanism wants the ice cream. You're being ruled by this mechanism, instead of you actually understanding yourself on deeper levels and where those attractions and diversions and aversions rather are coming from, right? So when you start to bring it into your life and you start to see on a daily basis, you're mindlessly operating in your attractions and aversions. And it's guiding your life instead of you knowing what is really happening here. And that takes, why? Because it takes a lot of fucking work. And it takes a lot of awareness. It takes awareness to even know that that's even a thing, right? So it's a lot of fucking work to actually live a mindful, aware life. And nobody really wants to fucking do it. I don't even want to fucking do it. I'll tell you, there's a bunch of shit. I'm about to go fucking, let me tell you something. I'm about to go teach these little fucking kids, right? They're I don't know, K through 3 or something. I don't know, something like that. They're freaking animals. It's a full moon, and that shit's fucking real. And teachers know it, right? It's full moon, and they're animals, and it's insane. And I've had to do actually a lot of work. It's caused me a lot of work as I'm doing all this other stuff in my life. You know, with all this music stuff and the yoga stuff and the teacher trainings and the this and that. And I'm not complaining. It's all this beautiful, wonderful stuff. I started to feel like I was getting a little overwhelmed lately, you know? And I was like, all right, let me look into this space. And it's like, no, just, you know, the teachers just push, just do it, just, you know, whatever these other teachings might be. I'm like, gotta look into deeper areas, like understanding why I'm even accepting these responsibilities and what it is that I want and why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? To get fucking real with ourselves and to recognize why we're pushing for it in the first place. What is that desire? And if we knew that there was a space outside of those desires, outside of our honor and dishonor, right? If we could handle dishonor, if we could handle disgrace, what would we do for a better cause, for a higher purpose? I'm not saying to just go allow ourselves to be disgraced. Sorry, that's a misinterpretation of what I'm saying, right? But to understand on deeper levels, I'm fucking done. I'm rambling. There's some good stuff. I just wanted to get that out. That was my venting there at the end there, just a little bit. I love you guys. Thank you for listening, whoever the fuck you are. I love you all, honestly. And I hope that, you know, I have a desire. I have a desire to help and be of service in some way. And I'm hoping that you know, that my sharing my stories or this wisdom with you, not my wisdom, but this wisdom, wherever it's coming from, you know, is in some way hopefully making your life better, right? And because I do believe it is my calling, and I will say I do believe my calling. Oh, I'll finish with this. That I heard once from a very wise but absolutely insane man, that there's a difference between a dream and a calling. And a dream is selfish, and a calling is selfless. Right? And now, so to follow that calling, it might require you doing a lot of things that you don't really want to do. Right? Now, if your dream and your calling fucking line up, maybe that's just like boom, right? And if it lines up, but what if you're following your dream and your calling, and it really winds up not to be the dream that you thought it was? What if it's really not that great, you know? And you get to the other side and you recognize that this is it, because that's basically what happens. Maybe it's great for a moment, but then there's always going to want something more. So to follow that calling, that deeper calling, is from a selfless space is not easy. Especially when you have to learn the levels of taking care of yourself first, right? Those paradoxes are always there. Like, take care of yourself so that you can fill yourself up and know that you are full in this beautiful divine thing outside of your little likes and dislikes, so that you can spread that service to the world and you can offer something beautiful, the beautiful divine core of who you are to the world. I love you. In Lakesha Lakin, I am you, you are me. Namaste.